Hey, this is H1. We're going to be running it back with another episode talking about chess knowledge, chess wisdom, and chess understanding. And today we'll be explaining how passed pawns can be trouble. This is a game, a miniature game that we're going to go over, a pretty famous one, probably one of the best miniature games that I've ever seen in my life, because we're just going to have to go through it. But white is Bent Larson and the black pieces is Boris Spassky. Let's get into it right quick. Okay, what did white play? They played b3. Now b3 pretty much initiates a Nimzo-Larsen attack, and we're going to go into the modern variation after the move e5. After e5, we got bishop b2 attacking the pawn. We have to protect the pawn by doing knight c6. After knight c6, c4, knight f6, knight f3, and now look what's going on here. Black's going to have to deal with this problem because now this pawn is being attacked by two pieces. The two pieces that this pawn is being attacked by is this bishop and this knight at f3. And the only thing that's defending this e5 pawn is this knight on c6. So black has to go into this position, not doing queen e7, not doing d6. Probably could have did d6. It probably could have worked, but a little bit more aggressive since it's back in the day when people loved playing aggressive chess. I think people still do, but you can see most of the top players nowadays are more positional than aggressive. There's no Mikhail Tal in our day. But black played e4. After e4, knight d4, attacking the knight, and the knight is attacking that d4 knight. Okay, so they're attacking each other. And after knight d4, we got bishop c5 attacking the knight twice. But what will white do with this situation? Because now black is threatening to capture this knight at d4 because it's only defended by this bishop on b2. What is next? What is there to do? Hey, I'll see you next time. No, I'm just playing. Let's get through it right quick. After this, knight captures on c6 to relieve the pressure. Is this a bad move? I don't know, but it is a small inaccuracy because it's helping black to pretty much get their pieces developed, okay? And we're going to see by this next move. Probably the best move for white is going knight f5 instead of taking this knight on c6 because this only helps black's development, which this is why black in this position is favored by the computers because after d takes c6, black is going to have more development than white. What do I mean? Well, let's go over this position right quick. I don't know what I'm doing with this little stick here, but just bear with me. This bishop can be developed very easily now. The only piece that is developed on the white side is this bishop on b2. Black already has two pieces developed, and we moved two pawns. Black's position is way more open and better than black's position right now. Is black supposed to be ahead in development since white goes first? Just think about that. You're the white pieces. You're supposed to have the advantage. You're supposed to be the aggressor since you go first. You're supposed to be taking advantage of having that first move. So what is going on in this position? Why is white looking dumb? This king sucks. He's not doing what is right. Look at all of these pieces. They're not doing what is right. You're supposed to develop. So we can already see in this position, black is ahead in development. And we're on the black side. Black is ahead of development. After d takes c6, another pawn move that we have to make. We can't even develop our pieces right, but we have to do e3 to develop our bishop so that we can castle really quickly, which that is a good idea. When you're behind in development, you have to do whatever is necessary to develop your pieces to get ahead of your opponent, especially when you're in a bad position like this, because now black's best move, which this is what they did bishop f5. So now white can't even do the massive central move d4 because now they're going to have to think about this en passant, which we just show you d4. Black can take the pawn like it was on d3 en passant. And I already have a video on that in my beginners playlist, so just go to that if you want to understand what are the requirements for an en passant. But anyway, that's why the bishop went to f5, and now you can just see very slowly white's position is getting really cramped, and this is why you can't get behind a development, especially if you're the white pieces. After bishop f5, queen c2, queen e7. What are we doing here? Now we're confused. Now white is in some mental troubles. They don't know if black is going to castle queenside, which is definitely a good option to get the rook on the d file, or a castle kingside. But with this queen e7 move, it's pretty clear that black doesn't want to waste any time and castle queenside and attack his opponent in the center of the board. Not the center of the board, but still, like, it still haven't decided anything. You can't even castle right now. What is wrong with you? I'm talking to the pieces like as a personality, but that's what you have to do in a chess game. After queen e7, bishop e2, finally, queenside castle. Rook on the open file. Bishop aiming, x-raying the queen on c2. So if this pawn moves, then we're attacking the queen on c2. Bishop on this diagonal. Queen on the e file. The only piece that we're not using is this rook. And we're going to see in a minute if this rook's ever going to get used. But let's figure out what's the next move. After queenside castle, we're going to see the worst move of the position being played right now. And this was a move in the 1970s. This wasn't our era, so we don't have to worry about people making horrible moves like this, especially grandmasters. He played, I don't know why they didn't play a simple move like a3 maybe to try to attack the king, or maybe, which is better, maybe knight c3. I don't know. What's better? Well, those moves would have been better than f4. F4? You moved 1, 2, 3, 4. You moved 4 pawns and you're behind in development, and all they have to do is bring this rook over here and be ahead of development, and they're definitely winning the game after you play the move f4. You can't just waste time. Chess is a very mental game, and for you to make a move like f4, like that's a good move? What are you thinking? I don't know what he was thinking. This is Bent Larson, and he has better games than this. This is just like one of the horrible games that they played. Even Magnus Carlsen have horrible games that he's played. But we're just talking about the lessons that we can learn from this position, right? White's in a horrible position, and black is up -5. -5 points on the computer. Black's next move, they did knight g4. Boris Spassky is going to work white's position. He's going to convert this into a win, because this is already a winning position. When the computer starts saying that queen c1 is the best move or a backwards move are the best moves, then you know you're going to suffer for the rest of the game. Those are super defensive moves. Usually the best defense is offense, and if the computer is like, well, your best defense is actually more defense, then yeah, this is horrible. It's a bad move. It's an indicator that you're in a winning position. Remember that. After knight g4, should we trade pieces? What are we doing right now? What are we doing? I play g3. Don't know why. Just moving all the pawns. Why not? Well, let's move the h pawn. Let's move the a pawn. The only reason why we're not moving the d pawn is because en passant. Let's move all the pawns. After g3, we got h5. About to just destroy this whole king side and attack this whole pawn structure. But listen here. Now every one of black's pieces are in the game. Because you might be thinking, well, this rook haven't moved at all. Since black decided to push this h-pawn, threatening to go h4 and demolishing this king side, now every piece is in the game. So now let's go back to this board right quick. We got development, we got space, we're added on space, and this is why white is losing this position. We got center control. Clearly, look at the center bind that we have. And if we're controlling the center, then we're controlling the game. And after center control, we're not up on material yet. We're almost there. We don't have a better pawn structure. We don't. White still have all their pawns, and they don't have double pawns. But king safety, who has a better king? Look at both sides' kings. We got the king on e1, and we got the king on c8. Clearly, since this king doesn't have a home, and this king can't just castle right here, because that's a horrible move. If this king can castle on the queen side, that would be better. But you know, if you're already behind if you're already behind a development in space, is that really good? If this knight wasn't here, that would be better. If this knight was like on A3 or C3, that would be better. But the game is already lost barely. So the king safety, we're better at king safety. If we can attack our opponent's king very easily with just pushing the H pawn, we're good on king safety. If your opponent can just castle very easily in a position, you're better. You're better. All right. So we're better on all four of these accounts. And the only thing that we're equal on is material and pawn structure. So let's figure out how we can convert this position into a win. After H5, we got H3 attacking the knight. And when you get into these positions right here, when you get into winning positions where you're up 5 points, you're not going to realize that you're up 5 points in the position. But when you get into this position and you realize, oh snap, I'm ahead of development, I'm controlling the center, my opponent is still moving all their pawns, they haven't developed their pieces, they haven't castled yet, you have to start like clicking all these ideas together to make one big attack. And you got to start realizing, oh snap, can I sacrifice a piece? Can I capture this pawn actually? Can I do this to break their position? What else can I do to improve my position to the point where I'm putting pressure on my opponent to give up, to lose, to blunder, to make more inaccuracies? What can we do? What can we do? Well, you know what you can do in this position? You know what you can do in this position? You cannot worry about this threat on H3 because the threat that white wanted to make was, hey, I'm attacking your knight should move, and once your knight moves, then I can get at a better position. Like, let me check this computer right quick. Let me check. If we just moved back with our knight, let me see. The computer is saying that you just gave up like 8 points once you moved back with the knight. If you would have did this sorry move going back, then you would have gave up most of your advantage and white would be kind of back in the game. You cannot miss out on opportunities like this, especially when you can play them. H4 was played. H4. What was the purpose of H4? Why did we play H4? Well, let's see. H takes G4. After H takes G4, H takes G3, right? H takes G3. And after H takes G3, we got Rook G1, trying to stop the pawn. And this is the passed pawn that I was talking about. Passed pawns can be trouble. Once they get far enough down, it can be a weakness. It can be a weakness sometimes, like isolated D pawn positions, isolated E pawn positions. Those can be weaknesses once all the pieces are traded off. But in this middle game, and we're trying to attack our opponent, and we got pieces that we can bring to the board to protect this pawn on G3. And look at all the pieces that white have. They're all on the queen side. This is a good indicator too if you can attack on the side that all the pieces are not at. So after Rook G1, trying to stop this pawn, because we cannot just trade rooks and let this pawn queen, especially when they have moves like Queen H4 to deliver the promotion very easily, right? After Rook G1, we have Rook H1. What? Trading more pieces. You already gave up a knight, and you're giving up another rook now? So we sacrificed material, right? We sacrificed material to get more development, more time to attack our opponent. So now we just like tripled this because we already gave away a knight and now we're giving away a rook. It's crazy how chess works. Like, camera quit on me, but you gave away a knight and you're giving away a rook. You can't just ignore this threat. So after rook takes on H1, we can move our piece one more square down to the promotion square, G2. What happens after G2? What happens? This pawn, it doesn't belong there. Hector went far. Like, seriously. After rook G1, which only move, the dang camera shut off on me, but the only move that white can do is rook takes H1 because they can't ignore this dang rook on the H1 square. They can't ignore that. That's huge. The only thing that white can do is accept the material and hope that black makes a mistake. That's the only thing you can do in this position. All my pieces on the queen side, and I'm only fighting with my rook and my bishop and my king, and black is fighting with all of their pieces. So next move, G2, and we're not going to just do rook G1. We can't do rook G1 only, because now after rook G1, queen H4, and so white decided to try to trick black into making a mistake by doing rook F1. And white was hoping for, please take my rook. Please, why not just take my rook? Well, what happens after rook F1? Because white wanted black to make the mistake by taking the rook on F1, and we take back, and now we gave away some material, and maybe white can get back in the game, you know? You know what I mean? It'll be a good trade for white if you just start taking pieces and not realizing that the threat is better than the execution. Remember that principle. The threat is better than the execution, because after rook F1, we got queen H4 check. We're checking the king. The king has to go somewhere. After the king goes to D1, you know what happens after king D1? In this last move, made white resign. Made Bent Larson resign. What's the last move? What did they do? Now we're going to take the rook on F1. But it's different though, because after you get a queen right here, after you get a queen, the king is attacking it back, and you got your queen in the position. So bishop takes on F1. After bishop takes on F1, bishop takes on G4, king moves, queen to E1, only move to protect is queen D1, checkmate. If the bishop moves back to E2, queen H1, checkmate. There's no way to get out of it. And so this was pretty much the best miniature game I have ever seen, and I will never forget it. And hopefully to the new people who are watching chess, to the beginners, to intermediate players that don't look at the classical games, please let this be a reminder that these are grandmasters that made the books that you're studying right now, that pretty much promoted, that pretty much began the lessons that you've been watching on chess.com or on these websites. No, learn from the grandmasters from the past so you know what you're doing. You can still learn stuff without the dang computer. Well, that's a whole nother subject.